Good morning, my name is Aaron Valadinos, and my topic is the legalization of marijuana in California. Specifically, Assembly Bill 64 and how it will harm the cannabis industry in multiple ways. To start off, the introduction to growing crops of marijuana in California started in Northern California, Emerald Triangle near Humboldt. And cannabis up there is basically a form of currency. People can use, from my personal experience, that a friend that moved up there, he was able to buy a truck for a few pounds of marijuana that he grew. And it also helps fund schools up to fire departments. And through the legalization of Prop 64, it will let companies into the marijuana industry, and they will start mass grow-ups. And with these mass grow-ups will come along with GMOs to make the plant stronger, with a more, psychoactive effect, and just to grow it faster in a higher quantity. Which also leads me to my next point, which is the introduction of genetically engineered crops has corresponded with the increasing of monopolies. I'm sorry. Monsanto. Monsanto is, in short, Monsanto owns half of the seed production in the world, which is basically a monopoly. Once they get into cannabis, they're going to be working with CBDs, and CBD is the non-psychoactive component in cannabis. And once Monsanto gets into that, they will use their GMOs and basically mess up the crop of CBD, or the positive CBD. And to show how GMOs are bad, there have been reports of pregnant women that they find the genetically modified cells or genes in their blood and in their fetus's blood, in their DNA. So in short, if Monsanto is continues with their if Monsanto continues with their work in CBD, it will cause more harm than good to the cannabis industry in California. So before Prop 64 was passed, it was Prop 215, which was the legalization of medical marijuana. And in my personal opinion, I feel like it was better that way, just because companies weren't allowed to go into it. It was just independent growers. And if you really wanted to buy marijuana, all you would have to do is go to a cannabis doctor and give them like $40 to $60, give them some thick excuse, and you'll have a rec by the end of the day. And Prop 64 has been changed 4 times. At the beginning, it was supposed 20% was supposed to go to the California Highway Patrol. 60% was supposed to go to the prevention of youth. 60% was supposed to be deposited into the Youth Education, Prevention, Early Intervention, and Treatment account. It's basically a program to help youth not get into drugs. And the last 20% was supposed to go into environmental restoration, but all those 3 have been removed, and everything that has been added are just keywords, slight words. And other than that, that was it. And that's the end of my speech.
Well, the clearest thing in your argument is the proposition at the beginning, which suggests that California's proposition that legalized marijuana is going to create some problems for us. It's going to have a harm to us. So I think that part, you've got a pretty solid start on the process. But after that, there needs to be a lot more structure to the speech. The points that you're making need to be more distinctive, and it needs to be clear how they're related to each other. It feels a little bit like you're going off on a whole bunch of tangents. I'm glad that somebody can trade a whole bunch of pot for a truck, and I'm not exactly sure how it's funding schools and fire trucks in Northern California, but I'm not sure how any of that is related to the proposition that you're presenting that suggests that 64 is going to harm things in the long run. I remember looking at your outline, and it seemed to me like your general presumption was that a more commercialized marijuana industry would eliminate the advantages of the more boutique type marijuana system that we have now. So I guess maybe what happens is like that Emerald Triangle barter system that you're talking about is one of the advantages of it not being commercialized, and your argument is that that's going to go away as a consequence of that. That needs to be explained a lot more. The notion that commercialized marijuana is going to be taken over by Monsanto needs a heck of a lot more proof. The idea that people will want to have the more pot that's cheaper, and I could not tell if your argument was that they were going to make the pot weaker in CBD or stronger in CBD, which makes the pot less psychoactive. It was not clear to me what your point here was. The only thing that seemed clear is that you don't like Monsanto, you think they're going to get involved in this, and there might be some dangers from GMOs. I imagine that pregnant women smoking pot have less to worry about from the GMOs than they do from smoking the pot while they're pregnant. I cannot imagine that the danger is that much greater from a GMO than the other is to a pregnant woman. So that seems like a very weird argument to be making at this particular point. You need some evidence on this. You say there's been a report of this happening, and I'm like, well, from who? Who said this? Somebody said, oh, I think my genes are altered by the Monsanto pot that I smoked. I don't know where this is coming from, and as a result, it's not particularly convincing information. So, if you were going to go back through what you had, I think you need to start with a clearer preview and say, look, commercialized pot is going to wipe out some of the benefits that we've had from having marijuana available primarily as a medical, through medical access. By medical access, we've had private farming or boutique farming that has produced quality marijuana that has given people the advantages that they need to have. Commercialization will result in it being overtaken, and those things will go away, and what we'll be left with is the McDonald's of pot that comes from Monsanto seeds, and those are potentially dangerous. Those are your claims, and they should just be stated that way at the beginning so that we know where you're going. As it is, it just feels like I'm going up a road and then turning around and doing a U-turn and going back another direction, and then there's something else that's going on there, and there's no clear endpoint or objective to the presentation. All right. There were some statistics. There was some information about what was taken out of Proposition 64, and you spent a good amount of time on that. I'm not sure why. What does that get you? What does it prove? Does it prove that the commercial interests are in control of what's going on? Is it a bad thing that we don't have all the money? And by the way, when you say 40% and 60% or 20% is supposed to go to that, and I'm going, of what? The tax revenues that we're talking about, the production? If you said 60% of the production is supposed to go to programs, I don't know what that means. 60% of the revenues, well, are you talking about tax revenues? That wasn't very clear. And even then, I'm not sure how it's relevant to the point that you're making about, I think you could argue that Prop 64 is flawed in a lot of ways. It's going to create some problems, but you got to be a lot clearer about how that argument's going to develop here. All right, and you should have held on for another 14 seconds so that you finished at 4:20 instead of 4:06.